The opening story from Christmas in My Heart, Volume 1, edited and compiled by Joe Wheeler, is called The Snow of Christmas, and it is also by Joe Wheeler. 3 doors he had slammed on her: the bedroom, the front, and the car. What started it all he really couldn't say. It was just one of those misunderstandings that grow into quarrels. In a matter of minutes, he had unraveled a relationship that had taken years to build. His tongue, out of control, appeared to have a life of its own, divorced as it was from his accusing mind and withdrawing heart. Catherine, it's all been a big mistake. You and me, I've tried, and I've tried. Heaven knows I've tried. It just won't work. You're wrong for me, and I'm wrong for you. John. Don't interrupt me. I mean it. We're through. What we thought was love wasn't. It just wasn't. No sense in prolonging a dead thing. Don't worry. I'll see to it that you don't suffer financially. I'll keep making the house payments, and you can keep what's in the checking and savings accounts. Don't worry. I'll send child support for Julie. John. Almost he came to his senses as he looked into Catherine's anguished eyes and saw the shock and the tears. But his pride was at stake. Ignoring the wounded appeal of those azure eyes, he had stormed out, his leaving punctuated by the 3 slammed doors. 3 weeks later, here he was, pacing a lonely motel room 3,000 miles from home. Home? He had no home. He had only his job, a very good one, and his Mercedes. That was all. Unable to face the prosecuting attorney of his mind, he turned on the TV, but that didn't help much. There were Christmas-related commercials or programs on every channel, and one of those ads featured a golden-haired little girl who reminded him far too much of Julie. He remembered Julie's wide-eyed anticipation of every Christmas, the presents under the tree that she'd surreptitiously pick up and evaluate by weight and size and sound, and the finesse with which she unwrapped and rewrapped them. He found it hard to be stern with her, for did not Catherine, too, unwrap them on the sly? It seemed that Catherine had been constitutionally unable to wait until Christmas should reveal what hid within those gaily wrapped packages bearing her name. So poor Julie came about this affliction quite naturally. Again he switched channels. Wouldn't you know it, yet another Christmas special. Had to be Perry Como. Still at it. Why, the Christmas special advertised as Como's farewell performance was a number of years back. In fact, he and Catherine heard it the Christmas season of Julie's birth. Como no longer had the range, but his middle tones still carried him through. Oh, no. Not, I'll be home for Christmas. You can plan on me. On the wings of Como's voice, he soared backward in time, all the way back to his own childhood. Was it his 7th Christmas, or his 8th? The 8th, for that was the year his parents had surprised him with an adorable shaded silver Persian kitten, which he had promptly named Samantha. Samantha had lived a long time, 15 years in fact. It was hard to envision life without that bundle of purring fur that cuddled up next to his feet every night until he left for college. And even then, whenever he returned home, every night like clockwork, within 60 seconds from when he turned out the light and slipped into bed, he would sense a slight vibration resulting from a 4-point landing. He would hear a loud purr and feel a whiskered head searching for a head scratching. Memories flooded in upon him in torrents now. How he had loved Christmas at home. His had always been the responsibility of decorating the Christmas tree, a tree he got to pick out himself. A real tree, never a fake. The fragrance of a real tree, the sticky feel of a real tree, even the shedding of a real tree were all intertwined in the memories of years. Strange, passing strange, how he measured the years by specific Christmases. The Christmas of the broken phonograph records with its now legendary lean-to by Mari Sandoz. Yes, Sandoz wrote it. How everyone had laughed and cried over that Nebraska frontier tale. Lean-to had gone into the family lexicon of memories. And as usual, all 4 of his grandparents had been there, and numerous aunts and uncles and cousins and family friends. Then there was the Christmas when Dad, for the first time, read all of Dickens' Christmas Carol. He had thought it would never end. But strangely, ever since that first reading, the story of Scrooge and the Cratchits seemed shorter every time it was read. And theater and movie renditions? They but reinforced the impact of the core story. And how could he ever forget the first time he had heard Henry Van Dyke's The Other Wise Man? Like Dickens' tale, it normally took several evenings to read. That poignant conclusion where the dying Artaban, under the extended shadow of Golgotha, at last finds his king, it never failed to bring tears to his eyes. That's enough, John. You've got to put all that behind you. Christmas? What is it but Madison Avenue's annual process of grafting sales to sentiment? That's why the first Christmas sale now takes place the day after Independence Day. But it wasn't enough. He just could not convince himself that Christmas meant no more than that. Instead, his mind flung open a door and replayed the scene in his parents' kitchen 3 weeks before. It had been anything but easy. Rather, it had been perhaps the hardest thing he had ever done, telling them about the separation and impending divorce. And he had begged off from being home for Christmas this year, telling them that a very important business meeting on the East Coast would make it impossible. Mother had broken down when she heard about the end of his marriage, for Catherine had slipped into their hearts, becoming the daughter they had always yearned for, that first Christmas when he brought her home from college. Catherine had taken it all in, the warmth and the radiance of the real tree, the crudely carved nativity scene. John had made it when he was 12. The exterior Christmas lights, the Christmas decorations everywhere, the Christmas music played on the stereo and sung around the piano, the Christmas stories read during the week, the puns, the jokes, the kidding and ever-present laughter, the crazy annual trading game, which was more fun than the usual exchange of presents, the bounteous table groaning with delicious food day after day, parlor games such as Monopoly, caroms, dominoes, anagrams, the crackling fire every evening, the remembering of the Christ child, the warmth and love that permeated every corner of the modest home. When he had proposed on Christmas Eve and apologized for the plainness of the home and compared it to the Marin County estate where she grew up, her eyes had blazed, and she had hushed his lips with her fingers. "Don't you ever apologize for your home, John," she exclaimed. "There is love here, and Christ, and father and mother, not just my lonely, embittered father rattling around in all those endless rooms alone. No, this," she paused as her gaze took it all in again, "this is the kind of home I've longed for all my life." Then her eyes, reflecting the firelight glow, softened and emanated such tender, trusting love, unqualified and unreserved, that time stopped for him as he gathered into his arms what had once seemed virtually unattainable. "This has got to stop," he admonished himself. "There can be no turning back." Out of the room he strode, down the hall, down the stairs, and out into the city. The streets were crowded with people. It was December 23, all with one goal: get those last-minute gifts. He passed 2 Salvation Army bell ringers and left a $5 bill with each one. Happiness and seasonal good humor were all around him. Strangers wished him a very Merry Christmas. Christmas carols were piped into almost every store. His attention was caught by a crowd in front of Macy's biggest window. He pushed himself far enough in to be able to see what they were all looking at. What he saw in a fairyland setting were hundreds of cashmere teddy bears in varying costumes. Julie had fallen in love with them the first time she saw them, long before they had become the rage of the season. And he had planned to surprise her on Christmas morning by bringing it to her at the breakfast table, rather than putting it under the tree. Oh, well, perhaps Catherine would remember to buy it. That is, which he rather doubted, if she was in the mood to have Christmas at all. He moved on, but seemed to feel an invisible force pulling him back to Macy's. 2 hours later, unable to resist any longer, he went back, bought one of the last 3 in stock, Even the window had been cleaned out, and returned to the motel. He shook his head, not understanding in the least why he had bought it, for he was a continent away from Julie, and tomorrow was Christmas Eve. After depositing the teddy bear in his room, he returned to the street. This time he walked away from the downtown district. He came to a large white New England-style church. The front doors were open, and floating out on the night air were the celestial strains of Ave Maria. He stopped, transfixed. Then he walked up the steps and into the church. There, down candlelit aisles at the front of the church, was a live nativity scene. Off to the side, a lovely brunette, eyes luminous with the illusion of the moment, was singing the same song he had first heard Catherine sing, and with the same intensity, forgetfulness of self, and sincerity. When she reached those last few measures, and her pure voice seemed to commingle with the angels, chills went up and down his spine. When the last note died away into infinity, there came the ultimate accolade of total silence, followed by a storm of applause. John closed his eyes, soothed yet tormented by what he had just experienced, by whom the singer reminded him of, and by the significance of that mother's love and sacrifice 2,000 years ago. Out of the sanctuary he strode, and down the street, mile after mile, until he had left even the residential district behind. On and on he walked. He did not stop until the city lights no longer kept him from seeing the stars. As he looked up into the cold December sky, for the first time in 3 traumatic weeks, he faced his inner self, and he did not like what he saw. Etched for all time in the grooves of his memory were the terrible words he had spoken to the woman he had pledged his life to. How could he have been so cruel, even if he no longer loved her? And that brought him face to face with the rest of his life. The question, the answer, and what he would do about it would one way or another dramatically affect every member of his immediate family from now and until the day they died. What was his answer to be? It was snowing. For the first time in 10 years, declared the radio announcer, there would be snow on Christmas. The windshield wipers kept time with Bing Crosby, who comes back to life every December just to sing, "I'm dreaming of a white Christmas." The lump in his throat was almost more than he could handle. Would this be a Christmas just like the ones I used to know? Could she? Would she consider taking him back? Although bone-weary from staying up all night and from the frantic search for airline reservations, he was far too tense to be sleepy. The flight had been a noisy one, and a colicky baby right behind him had ensured a wide-awake trip. He had rented a car, and now his heart pounded louder as each mile slipped past on the odometer. Now that he had thrown away the most precious things in his life, his wife and his child, he no longer even had a home. Belatedly, he realized that without that, life's skies for him would lose their blue. How odd that his mind meshed the graying of his personal skies with the cold graying of Kathy's eyes when he mentioned divorce. The blue of both was now as silvery as the ice and snow-bedecked trees that flashed by. The road became icier, and he narrowly averted an accident several times. Occasionally a vehicle would spin out of control in front of him, but somehow he got around them safely. At last, the city limits. He could hardly keep his runaway heart from jumping its tracks. Had the road to his house ever seemed so long? Then he turned that last corner. Darkness. No lights, no car. He fought panic as he skidded into the driveway, got out, and fought the bitterly cold wind and snow to the back door. Inside, all appeared normal. Nothing to indicate that Kathy and Julie had left on a long trip. Maybe they were at his parents' house. He rushed back to the car, backed out onto the street, and sped out of town, hoping against hope that he was guessing right. He didn't dare trust his fate to a telephone call. About an hour later, he saw the cheery lights of his folks' place. Through the front window, he could see the multicolored lights on the Christmas tree. And there, in the driveway, was his wife's car. He passed the house, then circled back on an alley road, cutting his lights as he reapproached the house. His heart now thumping like a jackhammer, he brushed off his clothes and shoes and ever so quietly opened the back door and stepped into the gloom of the dark hall. He heard a child's voice, singing. He edged around the corner into the foyer. Kerosene lamps, as always, gave to the room a dreamy serenity. His folks sat on the couch, intensely watching their grandchild, as she softly sang, kneeling by his nativity stable. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. There was a look of ethereal beauty about her, lost as she was in her Bethlehem world. "Oh God," he prayed, "shield her from trouble, from pain, from growing up too soon." Then, like a sword thrust through his chest, came the realization that he, her own father, had thrust her out of that protected world that children need so desperately if they are to retain their illusions, that childlike trust without which none of us will ever reach heaven's gate. The sweet but slightly wobbly voice continued, and then died away with the almost whispered, "Jesus, Lord, at thy birth. Jesus, Lord, at thy birth." His heart wrenched as he drank in every inch of that frail flowering of the love he and Kathy had planted. Oh, how little it would take to blight that fragile blossom. He wondered what his daughter had been told. Would she still love him? Would she ever again trust him completely? Upon completion of the beloved Schubert hymn, Julie sank down to the level of the nativity figures and propped her head on their elbows, gazing fixedly into another time. John now turned to an older version of Julie. This one leaned against the window frame. She was wearing a rose-colored gown that, in the flickering light from the oak logs on the fireplace, revealed rare beauty of face and form. But her face, such total desolation John had never seen before. In all the years that followed, that image of suffering was so indelibly burned into his memory that he was never able to bury it in his subconscious. How woe-begone, how utterly weary she appeared. A lone tear glistened as it trickled down that cheek that he had loved to kiss. Oh, how he loved her! He could hold back no longer. Silently he approached. Was it too late? Suddenly she sensed his presence and turned away from the vista of falling snow to look at him. She delayed the moment of reckoning by initially refusing to meet his eyes. Then, very slowly, she raised her wounded eyes to his and searched for an answer. Oh, the relief that flooded over him when he saw her eyes widen as they were engulfed by the tidal wave of love that thundered across the 5-foot abyss between them. In fact, it was so overwhelming that neither could ever remember how the distance was bridged, only that through his tears he kept saying as he crushed her to him, oh, Kathy, forgive me, Kathy. Oh, Kathy, I love you so." And then there were 3 at the window, not counting the snow-coated teddy bear, the rest of the world forgotten in the regained heaven of their own. And the snow of Christmas Eve continued to fall.